1978, almost 40 years ago, but I remember it as if it was yesterday. I was doing another long shopping trip with my mom, which meant she was dropping me off at the magazine rack while she was going to peruse the store for 2 or 3 hours. Now, you could do that to an 8-year-old back then without having to worry about typhus being called. My usual favorites were there: Hulk, Spider-Man, the Avengers, but there was a new group, the X-Men, and there was a new character with cool claws that I had no idea who he was. I remember taking a look and being drawn in by the artwork of John Byrne, but it was the story writing of Chris Claremont that really kept me there. See, I was fascinated with this character from the get-go. He was just cool. And he was something that I had never seen before in comics, kind of like an anti-hero. If you're not familiar with Wolverine at all, let me give you a little bit of background. He is the hero that was made popular by Hugh Jackman over the past 20 years in the pivotal role of Wolverine on the screen. But before that, there was a character in the comics. He was a mutant, which means he was born with certain abilities, such as enhanced senses or an advanced healing factor that made him almost unkillable. He had a metal skeleton and sharp claws that made him the best there is at what he did. Except what he did wasn't really nice. Now that was really cool to a young boy, but what really intrigued me was he was the first hero that didn't have an origin story. As a matter of fact, he had no memory of his past, except for his first name being Logan. So this character, Wolverine, didn't have a true origin, and I found that intriguing because I kind of felt that same way as a young boy. See, when I grew up, I didn't know any of my grandfathers. My grandmother passed before I was 5, and I had an older brother who passed when I was very young as well. My parents didn't talk about the past at all, so I didn't really know much about the past, and I found that this character was intriguing to me because we shared that. Especially my father. He was one of those old stoic Italian guys who didn't really talk about much at all, less the past. Now, this connection with this character grew over the next couple of years, and I started to become fascinated with him. If there was a comic book with him, I was buying it. If there was a corner in my notebook that I could write a little story about him or draw a picture of him, I was doing it. As a matter of fact, my first goal in life was to be a comic book artist, work for Marvel, and to draw Wolverine. As a 14-year-old, I actually drew a comic book and found a publisher that was willing to take a chance. We sold over 10,000 copies of that book, and I was very proud at that moment. However, looking back, if you ever want to see why a 14-year-old should not be paid to draw a comic, go on eBay and look up something called the photon effect, and you'll see why. Now, Wolverine connected to me in many different ways. The next thing that I became infatuated with was the martial arts. As they started to reveal a little bit about his character, one of the things that he remembered was that he had studied martial arts in Japan for decades. So if he was doing it, I was doing it. And I started to become intrigued with the martial arts, and it's something that I continue, and I still continue to this day. This infatuation became just an obsession by the time I was 19, and no longer was I satisfied with wanting to draw Wolverine, I wanted to be Wolverine. Although I tried to pop my claws as many times as I could, it didn't work, so I realized the only way to do this was maybe through the screen. I could do it through film. So I took the time to actually draw out an entire script based on the Frank Miller limited series. That is still my favorite story, by the way, of Wolverine. And I decided I was going to submit it. Before I did that, I drew some storyboards, and I actually took some Polaroids of myself saying why I should play the title role of Wolverine. Now, you have to understand, at the time, I had grown some killer mutton chops, and I was playing college football, so I was actually pretty jacked. I took this whole package, and I sent it off in the mail to the one and only Stan Lee. Now, of course, my version never got made, but I still have a very cool letter from his office saying thank you for the idea and for being a true believer. One of my connections with Wolverine. Of all these connections, my father did not understand a single one of them. He didn't understand why I would want to waste time drawing, what martial arts were, and why anybody would spend their time thinking about superheroes. As much as these were fantasies of mine, to him, they were just purely fantasies. Issue 2. By age 25, one dream had crashed and burned, but another one took its place. At this point, I realized I wasn't going to make it as a comic book artist. I was either not talented enough or lucky enough to get in that field. However, there was another connection that I had with Wolverine, and that was a love of nature and the great outdoors. I took that love very far and got myself a degree in biology and became a high school science teacher. Still wanting to further my career, I went out to the University of Montana, where I was able to get my master's in biology. Now, while I was out there, I had some wonderful experiences, but two of them really connected me again to this character. The first of which, with my mysterious past, my mother had always said some things about our past that I didn't know if they were true or not. One of the things was she said that we had some Blackfoot Indian blood in our history. I glommed onto that as a kid because it was something that I thought might be true, and I was infatuated with that tribe my whole life. So much so that when I got out to the University of Montana, I got on the Blackfoot Indian Reservation in Browning and did some teaching with the local population there. When in the comics, a couple years later, they revealed that Wolverine had a mysterious lover named Silver Fox, who happened to be a Blackfoot Indian. The connection happened again for me. The other connection that happened out in Montana was I was able to do some field research up in Glacier National Park in some of the most incredible backcountry you'll ever see. One summer when I was doing field research on grizzly bears, I happened to come upon one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I actually saw a real live Wolverine and her two kits running right across the field where I was doing some studying. And to make that even more intense, it happened to be in an area by the name of Logan Pass. To me, it was still one of the most incredible experiences of my life. To give you a little perspective on that, that is as rare to a naturalist as finding an issue of 181, The Incredible Hulk, in a 25-cent flea market bin. Which for you non-nerds, that's the first appearance of Wolverine in comic books. And no, I do not have a copy of that. Now, at the time, my father, again, was very proud of the fact that I was getting a master's degree, but he did not understand the concept of going all the way to go across country just to play in the woods, as he said. In his perspective, going down to the corner store, that was a big activity for the week. I started to realize as a young man, we just didn't have a lot in common, and we didn't share the same experiences. And as much as he didn't understand what my likes and desires were, as quiet as he was, I didn't even know what his were. Now, every issue, too, in a 4-issue limited series ends with a cliffhanger, and mine happened around the year 2000. In 2000, there was a couple of events that happened to me. One, my beloved Mariko died. Now, Mariko was not my girlfriend. Mariko was my pet ferret that I had for over 8 years. And we were inseparable. It was apt that she was named after Wolverine's one true love, Mariko Yoshida. As crushing as that was, in the year 2000, there was also the release of a movie called X-Men. And this was the first iteration of Wolverine on the silver screen. Although I was a little upset that this unknown actor was taking my role, I have to say that once Hugh Jackman got up on stage and I saw him at work, I was hooked. The future of Wolverine on the silver screen was bright. Issue 3. Around 34 years old, I had met and married the love of my life. How much did she get me? She had a tradition of sewing stockings based on characters for her family around the holidays. If you went there on Christmas, you would see Santa Claus, elves, maybe a couple of angels. For our first Christmas, I got my very own personalized Wolverine stocking to hang, and it still hangs every single year. Yeah, that's what it does. And to make it even better, her mother-in-law's gift to me that year was a mint condition copy of the 4-issue Frank Miller limited series so that I could read my old copy without having to worry about ruining the pages. My new family truly got me. Also, this year was going very well for me because around this time, X-Men 2 came out. X-Men 2 met some critical success, and it also started to show that superhero movies were more than just fights on screen. It ushered in a new genre of superhero movies showing that they were here to stay. But if you follow comics, at the end of every 3rd issue in a 4-issue limited series, that's where the hero hits a low point. The introduction of an obstacle that has to be overcome by the end of the last issue. The next 6 years, Wolverine and I, we had a rough patch. There's a couple of movies that came out. X-Men 3, which although it did okay at the box office, it was critically considered a horrible movie. And if you were a comic book fan, you were very upset of its misuse of characters, especially of Wolverine. Then in 2019, Wolverine Origins came out, the first standalone movie about Wolverine. This is what I had been waiting 30 years for. The first couple of minutes on screen, I was excited as it was off to a good start, and then Well, if you saw it, I apologize. It was actually the first movie that I almost walked out of, almost in tears. Somebody had the audacity to make a movie about my beloved superhero, and it had nothing to do with the character. It was panned critically, and it did not do well in the box office, and to me, I thought it was going to ruin superhero movies for the future. Now, about the only thing that kept me sane during this time was that I had the development and the birth of my own little runts, as Wolverine would call them. At this time, I had become a young father, and I had 3 young children at home. And despite Wolverine and I not getting along, I was becoming a family man and starting to see how enjoyable that could be. But I was also starting to see the pressures of raising a family, of being a parent, and all the difficulties that you could go through doing that. At this point, I started to have a different understanding of my father as well, and what he had been through in his life. And I started, for the first time, to connect less with a fictional superhero on the screen and a little bit more with my own dad. Issue 4. So, Wolverine and I had a bit of a reconciliation by around 2013 when the movie aptly titled The Wolverine came out. Although it wasn't perfect, it was good enough to make me have a little more belief in this character on the screen. As a matter of fact, over the next couple of years, Hugh Jackman played Wolverine in a couple of X-Men movies, and by this point, Wolverine was a household name. Everybody knew who this character was and who Hugh Jackman was, and what was exciting for me was everybody in mainstream media was starting to see what I was so proud of and what I so enjoyed for the past 30 years. This was a good time for the both of us. In my own personal life, I had become a principal at this time. I was a principal of a middle school, and I was very proud of this accomplishment. And to make that connection one more step, Wolverine in the comic books had become a headmaster of his own school. Now, although I was not off saving the world, I like to think that we were still leading our students with the same heart and soul. I did have a picture of myself with my claws as my profile pic for a little while. However, the Board of Education asked me to take it down. I never really understood why. It just showed me being the best I am at what I did. Now, in 2017, Hugh Jackman announced that he was going to hang up his claws, and after almost 20 years, he was going to play for the 9th and final time Wolverine in a movie. This movie was called Logan. When that movie came out, there was a lot of anticipation for it and the type of story that it was going to be. I would say for that movie, it was perfection. If you saw that movie, it was the perfect blend of action and acting that stayed true to the character and even garnered some Oscar nominations. It was what I had been waiting for my entire life. Wolverine was finally on the screen that he should have been. What made the movie special is it showed Wolverine fast-forwarded to the end of his career. His healing factor finally starting to fail. He was facing mortality for the first time. He no longer wanted to save the world. Wolverine in this movie was drawn back into saving the world when he realized for the first time that he had a child that he never knew about. He recognized that of all the good and bad things he did for his very long life, the most important thing he did was to bring that child into the world. And before the end of the movie, he realizes the most important thing he can do for her is to be a father. As he takes his last breaths, he realizes that the love that he has for this child and the love that she has in return for him makes everything worthwhile and is the only thing of importance that he's ever done. This last connection really hit home with me. A few months before this premiere, my father passed away. Now, after reflecting on the movie and really thinking about it, I started to realize some things. When I thought back about my father's life, the last few years of his life, I had more conversations with him than the prior 40 before that. Although none of them were about Wolverine or superheroes, we started to have conversations about the one true bond that we had, being a father. We both recognized and talked about how, of all the things we did in our lives, what we were most proud of was being a father. Logan came to that same realization at the end of his life as well. See, Wolverine taught me what it was like to be a superhero, but my father taught me that you have an opportunity to be a hero every day. Thank you.